Perhaps one of the most dramatic demos that I have for you is this demo here that shows you how to affect the transformation matrix of the canvas. Now this is the type of thing that you'd be used to seeing in Photoshop rather than native in the browser. So as I change these sliders here, you'll see that I'm able to change the image that's loaded into the canvas quite significantly. So here I can change the horizontal scale of the image. I can rotate the image. I can skew it left and right. I can change the vertical scale, and I can even pan horizontally as well as vertically. Now this demo is set up to show you the code that's generated in order to create this type of transformation. But there's a few other nuances that I'll show you that really makes this demo work. Now the first thing that you'll notice about this demo is that rather than having a dynamically loaded image, I have the image set in here with markup. It's a declarative image here. And so this is actually the fallback content that I have set up for the canvas. So if a browser does not support the canvas, it'll simply display the image to the user and leave it at that. But I wanted to show you how to do it this way because before we created an instance of the image within JavaScript and then loaded it in, but here I'm reading it directly from the markup. So if we come back up to the top of the script here, you can see that the first thing that I'm doing here is saying get element by ID, and I'm taking a look at the logo. Once my canvas is ready, then I have the instance of the logo that comes directly out of the DOM of the page, and I can say when it's loaded, then context draw image and pass in that logo. Again, I'm setting it to the coordinates of 0, 0 within the canvas, and so that's how I've loaded the logo from the page into the canvas. Now I've used a style sheet rule to hide the declarative logo that's defined within the HTML, and in this way I kind of get the flexibility of being able to maintain it within the markup, but I can still use it within the script. Now to make this demo work, I made a selection to say that all the input type ranges, when the onChange event fires, then we'll run the value change function. And just going down the list here, the reset button just kind of sets everything back to its original states and then calls value change at the same time. So let's take a look at value change. The first thing I'm doing is pulling the raw values out of each one of the sliders. Now I'm rounding the numbers to 2 decimal places for most of these items, and I'm just getting some of the whole numbers for the panning back and forth. So very simply, I'm using jQuery to extract the raw values out of the sliders, and then I call round number here. The implementation for round number is quite simple. I'm using parse float because again, I want to round to 2 decimal places. And then in order to make the rounding happen the way I want to, I just call math round, take the number, multiply it by 100, and then divide by 100, and then I get my rounding to 2 decimal places. Now you'll notice up here I have the controls declared as M11, M12, M21, and M22, and the last ones of DX and DY. Now when you take a look at the documentation, often you'll see the arguments for the set transform method declared as these kind of cryptic labels. You also might see it as A, B, C, D, E, and F. But the thing to remember, and if we look back at the demo, the value and the operation for each one of these arguments is this. So M1 will give you horizontal scale, M12 will give you rotation, M21 will skew the canvas, M22 affects the vertical scale, DX is horizontal panning, and dy is vertical panning. So with each one of these values, you can see down here that I'm generating what set transform would be if you made the canvas look like this. You pass in each one of those values in that order in order to get the transformation that you want. Back to the script. So once I've extracted out the appropriate values from each one of the input elements, then this script here is used just to report back to the user the value of each one. For each one of those input ranges, I have an associated span. That's the ID, so M11 or M12, and then the word value after it. And this just allows me to report back visually the value of each one of the input elements. So I'm using jQuery to set the text equal to, and I'm just using the eval function in order to grab the value directly out of these variables and stick it into each one of those spans. The important part for changing the canvas though is to call clear rect, and I'm passing in 0, 0, and then width and height. Now if you remember from my discussion of clear rect before, the argument list is to give it an x and a y coordinate and then tell you how big you want the rectangle to be. So this is the technique that's used to clear the entire canvas. So I'm starting at coordinate 0, 0, and I'm giving it the entire width and the entire height of the whole canvas. That way I'm clearing the whole rectangle that is the canvas. And then from there, I set my transform values based off of what's come from the input elements, and then I can call draw image to paint the logo onto the canvas once again. So again, with each pass, I clear what's there, I set the transform on the canvas, and then I draw the logo on it, and the logo then is painted onto the canvas based off of the transformation values that have been set. This last piece of script here is just what I use in order to render out the code that would be written if you used any of these values. And that's how you use the set transform method.